Welcome to the Awkward Zoo. I'm Randy, and this is Just Listen podcast. And today we have a chew on this, continuing on kind of our series of senses and taste. Taste is the sense. Continuing our series of senses with food. We are kind of. I guess we'll touch up on sound a little bit. Today, but there's not much to sound, so I didn't really consider it a full episode on its own. But it does correlate to what we're talking about today. But first, updates. I don't know. So I should hear back mid-January about a job. Yeah. Other than that, I've just been doing what I've been doing on Twitch and podcast, as well as what else am I doing? Playing video games. I did. I did kind of cave in and subscribed for 1 month of Disney Plus. And I watched a bunch of Christmas holiday stuff specials. I watched all of The Mandalorian second season. I already seen the first one. And yeah, I did watch since Disney does own 20th Century Fox, it's Fox Entertainment. They've been posting a lot of movies on Disney Plus as well from that company, and I watched Anastasia, the animated movie, and I have Once Upon a December stuck in my head. I don't know the lyrics, but I have like full blown like orchestra playing in like constantly like in my head. uh so there's that. So if you ever hear, you might hear me hum that um later on. But yeah, that's been like, it's just like that's just stuck in my head now. I don't know what to do with it. I'm sure my parents over the New Year's weekend are kind of sick of me because I've been like singing that melody and humming that melody like constantly, and it didn't work over New Year's weekend. So they're just listening to me hum Once Upon a December all pretty much all weekend. Uh, but yeah, so that's what I've been doing. I did cave in a little bit. Um, and binge watched a couple of stuff and movies that released. I did watch Candace Against the Universe, Love Phineas and Ferb, as well. And yeah, that's what I've been doing. Um, yeah, I think that's it for updates. So on to chew on this. Interjections show excitement or emotion. Kidding. But seriously, interjection. Um, Random news. Apparently, I'm a week ahead of schedule. So these videos released in 2 weeks. So random news isn't really doesn't really fit, and so I had to create an interjection. That intro was from Schoolhouse Rock. Uh, those old school people out there. uh, but yeah. So random news. Today we have random news. I talked about music before in random news. About Boa and her comeback towards the end of 2020, but just released over the weekend is Olivia Rodrigo, who's like, hey, you gotta watch out for this girl, man. She's super talented, amazing, great singer, and new song, debut single, driver license, and it's amazing. And if you watch the music video, warning, it is explicit. There is one F word in the music video. There is a clean song version which just removes the one word, and it's towards the end. But just a warning there. Um, there is one um, F word towards the end of the song. But other than that, it's not like it makes much of a difference. But just a warning there for any young um, audiences, if there is any. Um, there is that one word, but this girl is super talented. Um, and I can't wait for High School Musical, the series, season 2. She's one of the stars, and I can't wait for that to come out. And like I said, this girl, you gotta keep an eye out for her. Look out on her, rising star, and like she's going places. Disney has this knack of finding talent. I don't know, but they're good. They're good at finding talent. They're very good. And like I said about music, I don't really follow a lot of people, um, or keep up with a lot of things. But you should keep an eye out on Olivia Rodrigo. Uh, she is a definitely a rising star you should look out for. That's it for random news. So today's Chew on This, we're talking about senses, and last week we talked about what did we talk about? Sight. I don't remember. What did we talk about last week? We talked about sight, the appeal of food, and now we're going to touch and mouth feel. So now we're going into actually starting to eat the food, and so we're talking about the sensation, the feelings here. There's not many articles about this, except for the fact that touch, mouth feel plays an important part in how you experience food. But there's not much stuff out there. The stuff that is out there is about mushy food, because it's mainly geared towards babies and elderly, who can't really chew, right? And so it's about changing, like how. So a lot of articles are about how changing textures for the elderly and babies is basically what's out there. There's nothing a whole lot of like other or like information about taste, how important it is for their experience and like experiencing food and like all that stuff. Generally, um, so any information that I found on food52.com. Does chewy food put you off? Here's why. And vernbarona.com, 5 textures. And like I said, there's a lot of articles about other articles about baby food and feeding elderly. But so 5 common textures. We'll start there. 5 common textures are watery, firm, crunchy, creamy, chewy. I would add also slimy, because I feel like that's not like I feel like that's not like a category that will fit in any of these. Like I guess it can sort of kind of fit in like creamy, but like I mean like slimy as in like sticky and glue. I don't know, like like mangoes. They're kind of like slippery, right? And kind of and sticky because of the sugar. And then like durian is also kind of like slimy texture. Get over the smell. Um, uh, and like bad fish are kind of slimy. um, get kind of like slimy. But yeah, that kind of feeling. Um, Not necessarily sticky, but just kind of slippery and kind of like gloopy. I don't know. I don't know if you can understand what I'm trying to say by that. But yeah, so those are just generally like five basic kind of textures that like everything kind of falls in. How so? So texture or this mouth food is property of foods that is sensed by touch in the mouth and hands and is considered secondary to taste and fragrance. Um, so yeah, right. You're not really thinking about textures, right? Right, the texture of food is kind of like a second thought. You're mostly thinking about like what you want, right? Or what foods you want. You're not thinking about, oh, what texture do I want? Sometimes you're thinking about texture, especially when you're snacking or like you want a snack. You're like, sometimes I'm like, I want something crunchy, right? Or when you just want to munch on something, you just want something to chew on, right? Right? Or to like just something crunch sometimes, or something creamy. Uh, Sometimes instead of like, so sometimes when I want ice cream, it's not really I want ice cream. It's mostly because I want something like creamy and cold, and ice cream just fits that description. It, like the easiest. But yeah, it's like sometimes like when you have food cravings, you kind of crave like a texture instead of actual food. Um, but yeah, but generally, texture is, and that's kind of what this one article kind of suggests. Um, yes, is like kind of psychology behind like cravings is not looking for a particular food, you're looking for a particular texture. Um, but yeah, but this is something that is studied. The science of food structure is called food rheology, Rheology, and what they do is find textures in it's mostly like the subconscious and textures in the subconscious, um, and it, like studies from this show that chewing makes food taste better. So make sure you chew, and that it also helps blood flow to the brain. And so like with like particularly like elderly as kind of like diseases and especially like mental illnesses is to slow that down. Studies have shown that elderly people who chew their food a lot longer or chew their food, it helps to slow it down, helps to prevent it from happening, and that's because as chewing helps blood flow, and like I said, as you grow older, you kind of lose teeth. It's kind of harder to chew things, and so you get so certain elderly people are transferred to kind of softer, mushier foods, and so they're not chewing as often, and so that's what kind of like the studies are coming from and what they're looking at. Um, yeah, going back to like food balance, balance like food plating, there's a balance. Also, in food plating, you're not just appearances, but you're also balancing textures as well. It may not be on the forefront, but it is definitely there because you want a contrast of textures. You don't want everything to be creamy. Then then it tends to be like if everything was creamy, then you get like a sense of like fattiness and like lethargy, right? You don't want to finish, but if you kind of cut that with something chewy or something crisp and crunchy, then it's not all smooth and like melt in your mouth, but then you have a little bit of bite to it, right? Right, and you don't want everything crunchy because then you're always chewing and you don't want to always hear that, right? So we're also so like part of sound is in cooking, but also in the texture, right? You can hear what textures, right? If something is mushy, you can hear it. If something is crunchy, you can hear it, right? Right. And if it's just like a liquid and you're like slurping it, then you can hear it, like, all right. And so part of texture is as you're eating it, you can hear these sounds and these different sensations that part of the food eating experience. Um, what I find interesting in an article, in one of the articles, it says this is from the Food 52 article, that textures are also culturally tied, socially and culturally tied. Um, like China, Japan, Taiwan, you have the QQ or the mochi, chewy mochi, the mochi, the QQ kind of textures are kind of are popular, right? Right. Like boba tea, the tapioca pearls. You have mochi duck in Korea, the rice cakes, right? Like these chewier textures are pretty popular. Um, Fancy food tends to be smooth, tends to be tender, right? If you think about like a fancy restaurant, you think about like that tender, melt in your mouth piece of steak, right? Or meat that just kind of melts in your mouth, right? Right. Or like chocolate mousse is pretty fancy, or like fancy desserts are like it's kind of smooth, melt in your mouth. So like typically, right, when you think of like fancy restaurants or fancy places, what they serve, you think of like tender or soft, kind of melt in your mouth kind of feelings, textures, right? So like textures can be tied to these like cultural standings, to these social like classes as well. And um, and so that's mouthfeel and a little bit of hearing, right? You can hear the textures, and that's just part of the eating experience, right? You see the food and then you kind of feel the food in your mouth, then explore the textures, and you want to strike a right balance, right? When you're creating a dish, you want to strike a right balance. You want creamy, you want crunchy, you want soft, or chewy, right? Right? You want to create this experience not only looks good, but also tastes good and feels good, right? Right. And so yeah, so that's mouthfeel. Um, and then we're going to go into smell. Next week, we're going to be talking about smell. Um, which surprisingly, there's not a whole lot of information I can find about smell. Um, they all say the same thing, and there's not a whole lot of studies. Um, you kind of look at smell and food, there's not a whole lot. It just tells you, they basically all say the same thing, that smell is a very important part of taste. Um, and then you can find a whole bunch of stuff about like aromas and like aromatherapy, essential oils. You can find a bunch of stuff on that, but just like food and smell, there's not a whole lot. But um, so yeah, we have smell and taste left. Um, yeah. So let's head on to flip the script. So today's flip the script, we're going to go and take a look at some. We're going to take a look at an anime. Um, when people ask me for anime recommendations, I recommend this anime. Not because it's like that great of a story or animation, which is pretty phenomenal. It is good. It is good. Story wise, animation wise, it is good. Um, it is generically falls under a bunch of other. um, it's not a new story, but it is good. It is decent. But the reason why I recommend it to people is because it houses in it is particularly um towards the end, it houses in it the gospel story. um, it's a bit of a stretch because, like I said, none of these are perfect in comparison to the real thing, but they're stepping stones. There's way to tie in, and this anime is Guilty Crown, not to be confused with the video game fighter, Guilty Gear. This this is Guilty Crown. And basically the story is it's a dystopian society, of Japan. And what happened was there's this meteorite that, not spoiling too much, there's a meteorite that came and something happened and it created this explosion, a virus spread, and it happened on Christmas, and they call this day the Lost Christmas. Yes. And then 10 years later, the main character has lost his memories of the past, as like particularly during that time. um the time, and he's only like what, 15, 16 now, so he was only like what, 5, 6 when this happened anyways. uh but he doesn't remember much. uh and he's kind of thrown into this society where this group, I can't remember the company, kind of just manages the virus, and does it tyrannically. um and and he's kind of thrown into this resistance group called the Funeral Parlor, and through that he obtains this special power, or, from a void genome, and the power is called the Power of Kings. And what this does is allows the person who has the genome, it allows them to extract and materialize weapons from people's hearts. So he's able. And these things are called voids, or void. And basically, essentially, the void is, the personality or the heart of a person. And so, like, whatever he pulls out, it is basically sort of an essence, and something tied to the personality, tied to the character of the person who pulls the void from. um and like, okay, so what does that have to do with the gospel? What does that have to do with anything related to Jesus? So that's where I'm going with this. This is towards the end. So he has that power, but then he later on loses it, because he later on loses it, and he gains a new one of similar faction. And uh, and so what happens is he gains a different, void genome, and he pulls his own void, and his own void is a similar power in which it can extract, voids, but it not only just extracts the void, it not only materializes the void, but it also takes the virus as well. well, and so so you get where I'm going with this is that he takes upon not just taking the void, but also the virus that the person has. And so this is where it correlates to the gospel, is that Jesus Christ, he came to earth, and he died on a cross. And what that did was he basically took the wrath of God, uh, and bore our sins. For Romans 3:23 says, "Is for the wages of sin is death." And so basically, we are sinners. We are bad. We have this virus. And what Jesus did was he took that virus and put it on himself. And he paid that price. And it's right, because the price of sin is death. And he paid that price on the cross. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, "For our sake he made him to be sin who knew no sin, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God." Right? Jesus didn't sin, but he became sin. He who knew no sin bore our sin and shame upon that cross, and he paid the price, right? Just as this main character, which I completely didn't say his name, just as the main character Shu towards the end, and he bears the virus, he bears the good and the bad, and he takes it upon himself. Because what happens is he kind of becomes a tyrannical king because of the power, and then he loses it, and then he realizes is later on, like what he must do, and he took it upon himself to bear the weight of the virus, and which is why his new power not only grabs the void, but also takes the virus from those who are suffering from it. And just like Jesus, as he takes upon the virus of sin, and that plagues us, that takes a hold of us, and he puts it on himself. And he bore it on the cross, but it didn't just end there, right? As Christians, we don't just believe, oh, Jesus took our sins, he died on the cross, but that he rose up again, right? Because Jesus is God, and the power of God, and we believe in his death and resurrection. And he rose up from again. He rose up again. He's alive. We don't believe in a dead God. We believe in a living God, right? And right, the second part of 2 Corinthians 5:21, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. So he took away our sins and clothe us in his righteousness, right? Because he did not sin, and so that we can become righteous before God by believing in him who paid the price for us, because we couldn't do it ourselves. So that's why I recommend, like, if people ask me like what anime do you recommend, I recommend Guilty Crown, because then I can later talk to them about the gospel, right? I just like Shu, Jesus came to this earth. He took our sin. He took that virus upon himself, and that in itself is the gospel story, right? John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever so believes in him will not perish but have eternal life, right? And Jesus did that by bearing our sin upon the cross and paying the price, paying the penalty, and then rising up again in resurrected new life, so that we too can trust in him and know and have an assurance that we will also rise with him in his death and resurrection. that we are dead to sin and alive in Christ. So yeah, that's flip the script. So let's wrap things up. So we talked about sense of taste, mouth feel, right? Touch, just kind of mouth feel, how food feels, right? And we can also hear it. Like if something is crunchy, you can hear the sounds of it. If it's mushy, you can hear the squishes. Is right, and we talked about flip the script, guilty crowned, and how it relates to the gospel story. And so next week we will be talking about smell, in the sense of smell and taste, as well as the flip the script will be about the Lion King. Another story that I dearly love and talk about quite commonly in comparison to the Bible as well. So basically, a lot of these flip the script so far are the common ones that I do talk about to people, as they kind of show up or come up in Bible studies and stuff, in conversations. So Lion King is also one of those ones that I like to share and talk about, because a lot of people have seen the Lion King. If people are into anime, then Guilty Crown is a good one to talk about. Karate Kid in general, the quote from Karate Kid in general is easily able to pull up and talk about. Wally, there's not many conversations about Noah, but Wally comes up in conversation when I'm talking about like how you tie in like media and stuff to the Bible. Wally comes up as an example of like how do you tie stuff in, because it is basically an allusion to the Noah story. But yeah, so Lion King, we'll talk about Lion King. We'll also talk about I got over the 30-minute mark, and we also talk about smell next week. And yeah, so questions. What do you think about mouthfeel? Does it play an important role for you of how things feel? Do you don't like certain textures? Like you don't like things that are slimy? Which just reminds me of the quote from Lion King: "Slimy yet satisfying." But yeah, is there any textures that you don't like? Do you think texture plays an important role in food? What about cravings? Are you really hungry for something or wanting to snack on something, or is it just a texture thing? Okay, and then Guilty Crown. I don't really encourage you to watch it. If you're into anime, watch it. If you want to see, like I said, the second half, there's 2 parts, or technically we can say 2 seasons, and the second half is more geared towards. The second half is what I'm talking about, really about the kind of gospel story. Is kind of basically main characters kind of rise and fall, and as well as that new power. So him getting this new power and what it does. Episode 19, his kind of fall into tyranny is around episode 15. Yeah. So if you want to go watch it, or you just want to watch the specific parts, probably want to. If you want to watch the specific parts, it's probably around episode 15 to the end. If not, you just heard this kind of description. But what do you think about it? Right, like always with the flip the scripts, like, do you agree? Do you disagree? What do you think about it? Is it a stretch? Does it make sense? I don't know. It makes sense to me. But yeah, so that's it for today. And so I hope you have a jelly day. Bye.